Yeah, I kind of like comic books. I mean, I've got quite a few boxes. I think altogether, last I counted, minus what I picked up, like, say, the last couple weeks, I'm just a little over 5,000 in my collection.
What's up, guys, and welcome to Beside the Point here on Nerdy Blurb TV. Today, we're going to talk about comic books and how they're shaping Hollywood, not to mention what we think is going to happen in the future. I'm joined with Joey from Joseph's Books, and it's going to be a great episode, so stay with us. Coming from Nerdy Blurb TV, this is Beside the Point. I'm Ryan, and I'm joined here with Joey from Joseph's Books. Joey, thanks so much for joining us here today. Really appreciate you.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Appreciate being here.
So this is my first Skype call. I don't know. You were saying earlier that you had done a few Google Hangouts and everything. This is super new to me. So if at any time we cut out, just you're a cool guy, just stay with us and we'll come back to you. But again, really appreciate you. And I understand that you kind of like comic books, yeah?
Yeah, I kind of like comic books. I mean, I've got quite a few boxes. I think altogether, last I counted, minus what I picked up, like, say, the last couple weeks, I'm just a little over 5,000 in my collection.
Whew, yeah, I would definitely say that is, like, I don't want to say an exception, but you kind of like comic books. And here at Nerdy Blurb TV, we love comic books too. We love the movies that they come out with. And I thought we'd just kind of have two worlds collide and talk about how comic books are shaping Hollywood. Our first topic is actually what exactly is the whole craze with comic books and the movies that come into it. Why do you think that Hollywood writers and Hollywood producers always seem to gravitate towards books, mainly graphic novels?
It's actually a pretty decent question. So, I mean, I think why, a lot of Hollywood writers and producers are so focused on superheroes right now, not just because they're, the current hot commodity. I mean, that's one of the reasons why. But if you go back, several years, there's just something, just so interesting about superheroes and concept and, being able to take them off of the written page and just put them up on the screen for the entire, for an entire audience to look at and just kind of gasp in awe at the special effects. And, for a lot of people, in some ways, it's like superhero films are one of the ultimate escape fantasies, because I'm sure every person, whether they read comic books at one point or not, has at one time, as a kid or something, always thought about, man, what would it be like to be a superhero, or what would that actually look like if it was real? And, being able to get superhero movies on the screen, especially with today's special effects, really allows us to live out those thoughts and stuff like that. And as we've seen from, past comic book movies, from the time they were introduced all the way to the current Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is, I think, one of, if not the most profitable film franchise of all time, because people will always go in large groups to see these kinds of movies. So, on the producers and writers end and the company's ends, like, there, it's just a whole bunch of, things in one bag together, not only, so it's like I said, just allowing people who are watching the films to think about what it was like to be a superhero themselves, or just in their head living out their own fantasies and stuff like that, and just in a way I'd say recapturing their youth, and again just being very profitable for companies in general.
Yeah, I think I think you said a lot of really good points, mainly just like the whole like fantasy of it all. I think kids in general, as well as the nostalgic feeling that kids and adults alike like thinking, like what if I was more than what I really am? What if I was a superhero? And I think movies even though comic books and books in general, like they do a really good job at expanding your mind, I think for everyone, movies actually make it so much more real for everybody who goes to them, and it's an experience too. Like you said, like everybody likes going to the Marvel movies. It is a huge franchise that has many great movies that gives us great times. I think that it's just I think the movies in general are shedding a lot of light on comic books. I don't know what you think, but I think ever since the Marvel Cinematic Universe has kind of come to be, people have just wanted to read the comic books. I don't know if that's how you got into it or anything, but like I know that's how I got started into it.
Well, when it comes to me and when I started getting into comic books, that's actually more of just me growing up in this world kind of deal. My dad, he's a big comic book collector, so even when I was a little kid, before my mom and him divorced and I went to go live with my mom, but before all that, yeah, he took us to the comic book store every single Friday, because back in the day, Friday was New Comic Book Day instead of our current Wednesdays. And so, just being able to go into the comic book store and, in the eyes of a child, with all of the color and the toys on the wall, there's just so much stuff for us to get lost in. And so when I, got a little older, I was around 12 when I'd say I got into serious collecting, because up to the time, I'd just gotten, a couple little dollar comics here and there. But when I was 12, when Ultimate Spider-Man was a thing back in 2000, it started in 2000, but I got into collecting that in 2002, right around the time of the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie hit. And so, that's when I really got into collecting, and I was returning to the comic book store every single month for one particular comic book. And since then, it's just been, every single week I'd go, I would spend money, drop money, whatever I can. I was just always enjoying going to the comic book store every single week. And of course, now that I'm an adult, in my 30s, and I make money, it's like now I can buy even more comic books, to which even my wife says, could you just reel back on a little bit? But I just can't help it. It is one of my hobbies, and I always tell her, well, what do you prefer? Would you rather I spend money on comic books or drugs?
Oh yeah, that's a good point, and I guess you could say that with any kids out there too. Like if they're going to be spending any money on comic books, it definitely is money that is not being spent on drugs. So that's cool, because I actually got into comic books with Spider-Man and the Ultimate Spider-Man back when I was, holy cow, in middle school forever ago. And Ultimate Spider-Man was one of my favorites. I loved. I think I had all of them, really, and I just grew up on that as well. But it definitely changed the game for me, at least, when Marvel started releasing all of these really great movies that you could take serious as just a movie in general. Because I feel like back even before Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, I don't think a lot of people took the comic book genre movie serious at all, and I think now they're a force to be reckoned with, or a force that we just have to deal with because of how popular they are now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because back in the day, it was the only comic book movies we really had at the time that people took serious was, of course, the Christopher Reeve Superman movies, well, or at least the first two of those.
Right.
The Tim Burton Batman movies, because, everyone just thought the Schumacher Batman movies were a joke. And then, of course, when the Spider-Man, the first Spider-Man movie hit, that became really big. And then just 2 years prior to that, you had the first X-Men movie. But I think a lot of the comic book movies started to get big again right around 97 specifically, when Blade hit the screen, because a lot of people were actually surprised to find that was a comic book movie, and so that kind of helped a little bit. And then of course that helped X-Men get made, and then of course X-Men success helped Spider-Man get made, and then we kind of had for a couple of years we had sort of a bit of the Marvel comic book movies coming out. Like we had the first Ang Lee Hulk movie, the two Tim Story Fantastic Four films, and then of course then DC came back in swinging with Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins, which took everybody by surprise and just and like that one kind of snuck up on everybody, and to the point of like, it was like, oh wow, these movies can be somewhat taken seriously and hyper realistic, and still be an enjoyable comic book film. And then of course the same year that The Dark Knight came out, from Christopher Nolan's second Batman movie in his trilogy, was also the same year as Iron Man. And then of course when Iron Man hit, that too was another game changer, because that was just like, holy crap, this is a really good movie with really good characters. And then having Nick Fury stuffed into the end of that movie just set the world ablaze, it seems, because we knew at some point the Avengers were coming. And like that just, like I said, that was just like one of the ultimate game changers, because that was our introduction to the idea of the shared cinematic universe, which is now what many companies try to imitate and try to implement into their own. I mean, Warner Brothers has been trying it with with the DC comic books. What was it, last year? Universal tried to start off the monster shared movie universe and stuff like that, and it's actually been really crazy. But it's been a fun ride since 2008 when Iron Man first came out, and and it just really shows how important pop culture is to the superhero film genre.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like looking back, like Blade was definitely a surprise to a lot of people to find out that it was a comic book. But then X-Men was actually when that came out, I feel like there was more surprise there, even though X-Men was such a household name. But from Blade to X-Men to now we have a movie like Logan that actually, like, I don't even know what to think of that movie, because it's such a beautiful movie, and yet it's like a huge important one for the comic book world. So it's really cool to be able to see the huge step that Hollywood has made from like something so small as Blade, even Tim Burton's Batman to Dark Knight. It's so cool to be able to see the evolution in that, and with all of those movies and with all of the comic books that there are, whether they be superhero or not, it's really crazy to know where to start. And I actually wanted to talk to you about that too on our next topic, about mainly just with all the comic books out there. I feel like someone has to go to an expert such as yourself to try and figure out where to start. Like, where you had said that I had mentioned that I started with Spider-Man, Ultimate Spider-Man, but like where would you tell people to be able to start reading their favorite movie characters in their own comic book books?
That's a little bit harder to answer, just because these characters have been around, like most of them, for 60, 70 years, some of them. Superman, I think himself is like 75, 80 years. Actually, yeah, he's like 80 years now, and it's just really tough to decide where to start with those, because most everyone would say try to find the number ones, if you can. And then of course you look into it and you're like, oh my gosh, like what kind of number one? Because every few years these companies, they reboot some of their comic books, they restart the numbering system over again, so it's just really hard to say where to start. I mean, for me personally, when someone goes, hey, where should I start, for example, reading The Flash, right? And I'm like, okay, well, the current Flash is like, this is almost 40 issues in. And so in that case, I tell most people what they should do is start with the trade paperbacks of their favorite characters, because at least then they get a collection of those stories of their favorite character in one setting. And then if they choose to, go back and start hunting down single issues if they're going to be that kind of collector, or if they're just that kind of collector that says, okay, I just want to be able to read character stories, and not really worry about the whole keeping them in bags and boards and stuff like that and put them in boxes, then I specifically say, yeah, go with the trade paperback, or if you don't mind digital, go to Comixology, because you can usually buy like huge collections of, your favorite comic book character for, basically pennies essentially, compared to what you would spend, at your local comic book store on said trade paperback or the single issues, respectively. Because on Comixology and stuff, you can spend, like I said, about the same amount of money, and just get, a whole collection worth of stuff. And when you can actually, with Comixology and reading online, you can actually tell somebody, you can start with the official #1, like the first one ever, and that's doable. But again, if you want, if they're that type of person that wants to feel it in their hand and actually turn the page, yeah, trade paperback from the start of a particular storyline is the best way to go. And then you can also recommend some of the bigger like events that have happened over the course of time. Like if someone says, what's a good Avenger-esque styled story where it's just a bunch of superheroes together, I was like, okay, go with Secret Wars. Secret Wars was a huge story back in the day. You can get the trade paperback for, I think, like $15, probably less if you can get a used copy online or something, or just go to a used bookstore. I get a lot of my trade paperbacks from used bookstores that would be, in whatever city I live, and instead of spending $17, $20, I get them for like $7, $5, so, and it's pretty cool that way, and I really enjoy that.
Hey guys, ComicManJake here. Hope you're enjoying this episode of Comics and Movies. This is what we're going to be talking about. What we're going to be talking about is if you really want to start off in the comics. Well, for DC, go to the New 52 run. Best run ever. That's for starters. I mean, you don't have to read all of DC's run, but if you want to, you can. Of, Final Crisis, all that stuff. But if you want to get like the most current stuff right now that's out, which is Rebirth and stuff, start off the New 52. It was meant for everyone to start over if they wanted to, for new comic book readers. For Marvel, it's a little bit more difficult right now. I mean, they're doing a fresh start right now, but I wouldn't recommend jumping on that point. But, I mean, if you really want to get more into knowing everything about it, pick up Marvel Unlimited. It's an app that you can download on your smartphone or tablet. You pay a subscription rate. Usually the first month you get is free. But if you do a subscription rate, I mean, it's about, I think if you do yearly, it's $120. I know it's a little things. Or you can do a monthly rate. And you can just get all the comics, all their backlog. And it's really, really good on that. That's what I recommend too. Alright guys, hope you're enjoying it. Take care.
Yeah, I feel like, especially when it comes to superhero comic books, I feel like it's an extremely daunting task to say, or to even consider starting from the beginning, because if we talk about Batman, we need to go back like almost a century almost to start from there. But really, even starting from there, it's like not the best writing in the entire world. It's really campy, it's really outdated and everything. So it's nice to have DC or even Marvel reboot some of these titles. And I feel like a huge misconception as well is that not all comic books are superhero comic books. You and I were talking about this earlier, but I actually, believe it or not, and I feel like a lot of people don't believe me when I say this, but I read way more non-superhero comic books than I read superhero comic books, because I just love a good story in general, and not that superhero books don't have that. It's just that I have just seemed to really enjoy and be driven towards smaller titles that have to deal with mystery and murder and all of that kind of stuff. And I feel like a lot of people don't know that, because so many movies are made from superhero comic books nowadays, that I feel like the stigma is like there's only this genre and you can only stick to that. And I feel like just making that known to other people, saying that Nailbiter or the Woods or anything such as that is something that they should invest their time into, because it's such a great story. I mean, how do you feel about non-superhero comic books yourself?
Oh, I mean, I'll admit superhero is my primary,
Right.
but I do get a lot of books that are not superhero related whatsoever. Especially with a lot of the smaller publishers. Like, I'm getting this one comic book right now. It's called Delta 13, which is like a sci-fi horror. If I had to say it as anything, it's sort of like a seminal cross between, say, Aliens, the movie Virus with Jamie Lee Curtis, and that one Paul W.S. Anderson movie from, I think it was like 1997, Event Horizon. So it's kind of like a mashup of all those kinds of movies, which is a very, very good book so far. It's only on issue 3 too. So, and then I get quite a few Boom Studios comic books, such as Coda, which is a sort of dystopian fantasy, which is actually really, really cool because the main character rides a pentacorn. So, like kind of like a unicorn, except he's got 5 horns. And it's just like there's all this magic and stuff like that, but it's also just sort of a dreary, downtrodden sort of place too. So it's not like an ideal fantasy world, which I really, really like. And just so many other comic books like that. I mean, I think Boom Studios kills it with a lot of their books. I think IDW does good in some regards. Image is another comic book company that has a book out called Isola, which is also their kind of fantasy styled book. And I mean, if you just look around the tables every single week, you'll find comedy, you'll find horror, you'll find crime drama, thrillers, like all the above. If it's a genre out there, there is a comic book for it. And that's what I really like about this hobby too, is because even though I do collect primarily superhero comic books, it is a treat to get something that isn't superhero, because it sort of breaks the mold of what I'm expecting week by week. And so, to be able to take a different kind of comic book home and read it, it's an experience. It really, really is. And then it sort of, broadens my horizons too, as to what I can expect week in, week out. So.
Yeah, absolutely, because I actually started reading superhero comic books because I was shallow enough to think that that's all that ever existed. So I picked up Spider-Man, Ultimate Spider-Man, and I picked up Batman. One of my favorite comic books is the New 52 run with Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo doing Batman.
Oh, God.
It's so great, and anybody who is looking to dip their feet into comic books, I say that's definitely where you need to start, because it's just so great. And I even lent out a copy of that to one of my buddies, and he's had it for a while, and I wish he would just give it back to me, because I just always want to keep reading it. But you had said that there were just so many different kind of genres out there to be able to just continue to read and to immerse yourself in. And I feel like coming from, I mean, I say Superman, the very first comic book, or at least one of the biggest ones to ever come. I think we've come a very long way from then until now, because now we're here in a generation to where comic books are taking over by storm when it comes to movies, TV, and even just like books in general. I think it's safe to say that comic books are here to stay, but really what I wanted to talk to you about, and for our next topic, is where do you think comics will go from here? Because you had mentioned Comixology, which is a great service in bringing digital comics straight to your phone, which I subscribe to and I absolutely love, and I'm always reading comic books on my phone. But where do you think comic books will go from here? I mean, do you think they'll continue to make movies and TV shows, or do you think there will be like a new service, or what do you think?
I mean, that's hard to say, because it's really hard to tell, specifically, especially right now, where superheroes reside as far as media goes, in terms of, is this, gonna be, is this gonna be something that's gonna keep on going as popular as it's always been, or is it gonna slow down? A lot of people who have compared current day, the current day comic book movie boom to, say, the comic book movie boom when Westerns were a thing, and then of course in the 70s and stuff, the 70s and the 80s, you had the martial arts fad that was going, and it's like, action movies after that in the 80s, and then the 90s was like a lot of the bigger blockbuster movies like Titanic and Terminator 2 and all that stuff. So it's just really hard to tell where it's going to sit as society progresses and continues. I mean, right now DC over at Warner Brothers and stuff, DC Comics and stuff, they're going to be launching their own subscription service soon, which is just going to be pretty much all of the DC, movies and stuff I think are going to be on there. They're launching some original shows, starting with the Titans, which is going to be their version of the Teen Titans animated series and stuff and comic book, which I think is going to be very interesting. So I'm pretty positive that at some point print comic books are going to stop altogether as well. I think that eventually digital is going to be the way of the future. I don't necessarily think that comic book movies will ever stop, but I do believe at some point they are going to start to slow down, because even though I don't think we'll ever see a fatigue of people who want comic book movies, there will be a small probably decrease, especially when a new idea is introduced that people might start kind of working their way over toward, just because that's how change it works as far as film goes. And that we're not going to go back to the time where we'd have to wait 3, 5 to 6 years for a single comic book movie. There's always going to be those studios that are pumping out comic book movies once a year, twice a year kind of thing. As far as Marvel Entertainment goes, film is where they're getting most of their profit right now. And because comic books, specifically print comic books, aren't doing quite as well as as a lot of people might think, just because of digital. And then of course people who are more interested in the movies and just want to see that live action visual representation of these characters and stuff. And so yeah, I mean, again, it's just really hard to tell where superhero films and stuff in the media will go in the future. Again, I think that I don't think they're going to be going away completely, but I do think at some point it will start to slow down a bit.
I totally agree, because just like you said with Western movies, which I actually really love and wish they would come back with, and who knows, maybe that takes over next. I would love that. But like I think there will be enough people that will be fatigued by it, but that cult following of people that either can't let go of their childhood or just want to be able to be more immersed in these stories with superheroes or just like that comic book feel in general. I feel like there's always going to be a home for comic books and comic writers in Hollywood as well as television, because Netflix has a great shows more than one show with the Defenders, that is Daredevil, Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, and so on. It's a great show. Maybe we'll see more of that in TV, but it's very interesting to see that DC and Warner Brothers is actually coming out with their own streaming service, like you said. And I actually thought a couple years ago that that's probably the next thing to come, because when Disney kind of talked about Freeform and that streaming service and how they were going to pick up Cloak and Dagger, I thought that's probably where so much of this is going to go, and that's a great show in itself, and I totally can see that happening more and more. But when it comes to trade paperbacks and just like single issues in general, yeah, I can definitely see them being outdated, being things to the wayside because of how great digital comics are. And that's kind of sad to me, because I have a lot of trade paperbacks. I love actually having the book, like a physical copy of a book. There's just something about having a book that I really love, and I hate to think that will go away. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, as much as I don't want to say that print will go away, it is really really sad to say that, yes, eventually I believe it will, and that the only thing that's going to be keeping it alive within the years to come are the people who go to the comic book store like religiously every single week and buy comic books and like But after some time, these companies are going to look at sales and just decide, hey, we're getting more sales in digital, and eventually the cost is just not going to be worth it. And then they might do, some, big collected omnibuses of comic book stories and stuff like that, as they still do. But eventually, then those will start to kind of wane. And then eventually print will just stop altogether. I mean, even today, kids growing up and stuff, they have their Kindles, they have their iPads and stuff like that. That's where a lot of them are reading books and stuff like that. I mean, a lot of it's really sad to say, but there are some kids today who don't even know what a library is. My cousin, she's got 2 kids herself, and they've never stepped foot inside of a library, let alone have seen an actual book. They both have iPads and stuff like that. So I remember one time I went over to visit when I was visiting over there, and I had gone to the comic book store, and I had gotten I'd gotten a graphic novel, and I started reading it over there, and their question was, "What is that?"
Wow.
And that was just kind of sad to hear, but kind of fun at the same time, because it's kind of like showing them, hey, this is what this looks like, this is what this is. And yeah, it'll be sad to see it go, but that unfortunately is the way of the future, because like I said, these companies are good. They're gonna look at costs, and it is cheaper to just put it out there online than to spend money on like so many probably hundreds of pounds of paper, as well as color cost of printing, and then the shipping and all that. And they're gonna eventually see that sadly it's not worth it to keep doing that. I mean, do I think it's gonna happen anytime soon? Like, if I had to put an estimate on it, I'd say we got maybe at least another 20 years. But then also at the same time, once they do officially stop printing comic books and it's all digital, what that's also going to do is that's going to make, physical copies more of a commodity and stuff like that. And, people who like collecting things that are, that essentially don't exist anymore, that's going to make anybody with a collection probably, jack up their comic books as far as, any kind of value whatsoever, which is what a lot of people want. I mean, one of my buddies, he's a collector too, but he doesn't read his comic books. He just boards them, keeps them in nice condition. He's like, I'm just waiting till one day they stop printing comic books before I sell any, because a lot of things get valuable when you can't get them anymore from any random store or comic book store. So
yeah, I mean, look at records and record players. Those are things of the past and of the wayside, and yet people still buy them all the time. All of these hipsters buying up records to either hang on their wall or to actually listen to them. I know a few people who actually listen to them and prefer that sound, and that's for them. And because I'm someone who likes to actually sit down and read an actual book, so I totally get that. I get that there are people who want to either hang on to the past, or that people just have their own kind of taste in everything. But like when it comes to comic books in the future, I honestly think that they're going to be fine. Much like the newspaper has just moved on to blogs and just websites now, to where we can just read any of their articles. I think if that's the way to go, you just adapt to survive. I think comic books in general are going to be just fine because of how well received they are in Hollywood. So I very much agree with you. If they're going to die out, it's going to be a long time from now. But if they do, they're going to be just fine.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that comic books themselves and the concept of the comic book, like you said, it's just gonna evolve. It's just gonna all go to print, because artists and writers will always be around. That's just a reality. There have been people drawing and writing for since the dawn of man, essentially. So they'll stay around. It'll just be, we'll just have to hit the download button instead.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure from a writer yourself, which I'd like to talk to you about before we jump off here, but I'm sure you can definitely like attest to that and try and figure out what you would like to do in the future. Tell us a little bit about what you've written and maybe what you are writing about.
Okay, so yeah, so I have written, I've written a total of 5 books. I published 4 of them. And I write superhero fiction because, I like superheroes so much. My original goal and idea was to make comic books, but, due to lack of funding, I just can't afford I just cannot not afford artists for full comic books and stuff like that. So I just take to writing the comic books instead. I took my scripts and turned them into novellas, and then what's going on with that is I've been, writing a book for the single characters and stuff like that. And then, of course, I'm putting them together in their own team, sort of like an Avengers or Justice League kind of thing, where I think that's just a really, really fun idea. I really like to write about these characters and stuff like that. And my hopes are if I can maybe generate enough sales that I can save up that money to hire, a decent artist in order to get a comic book made, but it'll probably be available mostly in digital. I'll probably have a few print copies off to the side, but primarily, yeah, I would release it digitally, so I can charge less money for it too. In that regards, hoping to up costs on that. But yeah, it's just been I've been writing books since I was 12 years old. I wrote my very first one when I was 12, which is the first character, Tiger Man, which was sort of a pseudo fantasy of mine because growing up, I've always loved Power Rangers. So there's a little bit of that kind of in there. I loved reading the Animorphs books growing up. I thought those were amazing. The show was just absolutely amazing. That show got canceled way too soon. And, so I kind of just took those ideas and made them together into my very first superhero called Tiger Man. And that was just so much fun. Then when I decided to make it a full book series, I, re-updated them in, it was like 2014, 2012, 2014-ish. And then I came out with my second book in 2015. I came out with my second book, which was sort of an Arrow kind of guy. He's an assassin that shoots arrows and stuff like that. But I really ended up liking that story. And then in 2016, I released 2 books, Nebulous and Hyperbolt, which, Nebulous is sort of, he's an alien with cosmic kind of powers and stuff like that. He can, tear holes open through time and space and kind of reach through. So he could be standing, 20 feet away from you, open up one of these holes and punch you in the back of the head kind of thing. So I always really liked that. As a concept. And then of course Hyperbolt is just, I really like the Flash, so I wanted a speedster.
Yeah, it's cool.
So I made my own speedster, so my own little universe of superheroes and characters that one day I really hope to be able to see in a comic book and stuff.
Well, cool, and I wish you all the luck. If any of us want to check out any of that, do we just check into your YouTube channel, or is there anywhere that we can be updated on those books that you've been writing or have written in the past?
Yeah, so you can take any of the names, Tiger Man, Exile, Hyperbolt, Nebulous, just go on Amazon because I sell all of them through Amazon and stuff like that, and you just take those and just go ahead and do that. And I think on my YouTube channel, if you click on all of my videos, I've got links to my website where I promote my books, and then of course the actual buy site where you can buy the books, and they're both available. All my books are available in digital and print. Cool.
Well, awesome. Well, before we sign off here, I just want to say that any of you who are watching this video, check in the links below in the description below. You can check out all of Joey's channels, all of his information, anything to where that he has talked about today. Go and check that out. I'm sure it's something I know that I'm going to jump in on this and see what it's all about because it sounds pretty interesting. And he's just a great guy. Go check out his channel. You like a couple of his videos, go and subscribe. He's got a lot of really cool content when it comes to comic books, and we really appreciate all of you guys checking us out here. we're going to wrap things up and just say thank you so much to Joey. Thanks so much, Joey, for dropping by.
Hey, thanks for having me. I always like getting together and just, you know, talking comic books and movies.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully we can work again. And those who are watching us, subscribe to our channel for more content. We got a lot coming up for you guys. But until next time, we'll see you again.
Bye.
We are the music makers, and we are the dreamers of dreams.
I got a question.
Yeah.
Is my picture frozen?
It is frozen.
I noticed that.